Vertical Pursuit is the podcast that you have found. Welcome in, Mike Barrett, Mike Tatlock. Mike is a pastor and an NBA team chaplain. I am a former NBA TV broadcaster and now kind of a jack of some trades.
I was going to say, you're a Renaissance man.
Well, some days. But anyway, we started this a year and a half, I guess a year ago. I don't know when it was, a year and a half ago. And as we've fallen into a rhythm, I think that we've, number one, we've gotten more comfortable with it. Number two, we've realized through the reaction of others what they like to hear, what's it may be important to hear. And as I've said before, and I said in our last episode, we kind of started it out thinking there needs to be a place for men to go for resources. And there are some, but men who aren't always specifically and in particular in this rock solid walk with our Father, but certainly that's the lens that we see things through. That's the filter that we try to use. And thankfully, from some of the mainstream stuff I pay attention to and some of the mainstream podcasts and things that I look at and pay attention to, and I think you would agree with this, Mike, there is a massive uptick in the mention now of people coming home, men coming home, men searching deeper for meaning. After a really weird storm that we have come through, not completely, but as a society, a little bit at least. And even in my own life, as I've talked about in episodes before, but at least in the Pacific Northwest, having a very public ending to my days as an NBA broadcaster and having a significant storm in my life in terms of having reinvention of what you do, but also who you are, because we know today, and it's not a great thing, but who we are is largely tied to what we do professionally. We've talked about the dangers of that and how ideally our identity isn't in things we can lose. But storms in life, and it doesn't matter what they are. I mean, I've talked about this openly before too, but after that career ended, and I chose to not go back into that field. I chose to try some new things. But my goodness, is that a challenge? Even now, 6 years, 7 years later, is it a challenge? But then even storms like the day my wife learned she had breast cancer. And then I was like, okay, I mean, this is another storm. And at least I, at that point, had the previous storm where I think I learned some things. But then a storm of my dad passing away fairly suddenly, and yours very suddenly years before that. And then my father-in-law passing. And it seems like with each storm that I have had in my life, and for a long time, what I've come to realize is I didn't have many storms. I just kind of floating along and everything was good. And then all of a sudden, and you start to realize why these things happened in the way they did, I think probably storms were inevitable, and I happened to get them in a bunch over a couple of years. But storms are insanely revealing. And we've talked a lot, and you lately in some of your sermons, you've talked a lot about the reveal. What is being revealed to you right now? And I think the test and what's revealed through a storm is where your house is built. And where, I don't want to steal all your thunder here because these are your lines, some of them I'm stealing, which I've done before and I will do again. But it's that we can go back to scripture that a lot of people know and verses a lot of people know about: a house built on a rock, house built on sand. But I think when you've talked about that, especially recently, and a lot of times when you do one of your sermons, which are great and can be found at gracechapelonline.org, go back and listen to some of Mike's sermons if you haven't heard them. And you can go all the way back and listen. They're all good, and everybody who preaches is great. But some of them recently talking about, and we don't often do this. I should, because I know that you prepare a ton. And if you're like me, when I would prepare to broadcast an NBA game, I would use 10% of what I actually prepared in the actual broadcast. So I know you're like that too. So I like to grab something that is of a topic lately that you have talked in length about. And this revealing idea, and a lot of it came up through the Sermon on the Mount, which is the greatest sermon ever given. This idea that had to completely easily resonate in the minds of the audience then listening to Jesus talk, because they could easily see the picture. And you even showed a great photo in your last sermon of a house, like a beach house, that was not built on a solid foundation. And after a little bit of erosion and you can picture it in your head, and a little bit of time and some serious storms, this house was falling down. So if you picture that as being in your makeup, in your life, in your personality, in your family, it gives you a clear illustration of the importance of where is your foundation.
Yeah, that's keep going.
No, I'm just parroting you, my friend.
Well, no, we all know if you've grown up in church, you've heard the passage, wise man, foolish man. There's songs. Remember those little like singing these little kind of kid songs around him and stuff like that. And I think people know that, but what you just said, I think is true, is storms reveal foundations. And we all have storms. And like you had just mentioned, the storm of losing your dad, and storm of Shelley being diagnosed with breast cancer, and, the storm of you, transition of job, and things that are outside our control. And so we all have storms that we've gone through, and it reveals, man, where's my foundation? And is there cracks? Is there a foundation that's built on the wrong soil? And so, man, how am I doing right now? And I think like that's the part that Jesus was getting at. That's why it's so relevant. That's why it's been repeated so many times. And even right before that, it's interesting that Jesus, right before he talked about that, he talked about false prophets. And then right after Jesus made that statement, a lot of people don't keep reading, but it says that the crowds, after he said, the wise man that hears his words, puts them into practice, builds his house on the right foundation. So when the storms come, you stand strong and you weather it. And I think the thing is this, that what Jesus promised, the whole Sermon on the Mount, and why Jesus came, because Jesus made one promise amongst all promises that stands out to me, and he says this: I came that you may have life, and life to the full. And the word there is the idea of flourishing, thriving, vibrancy. That's what Jesus came. And so this is what I tell people. He didn't create us to be surviving. He created us to thrive. And so often we want to just navigate life that allows me to survive the storms of life. But actually, is it possible I can thrive in the midst of the storms? That's, to me, is two different things. I mean, so there's really three scenarios here. Scenario one is I collapse in the storm. Scenario two is I survive the storm. Scenario three is I thrive the storm. And I think many of us are bouncing in between all three of those things. And so, like, what does that mean? Jesus said, he said, how do I get there? So what's the practical part of it? He says, if you hear my words and then put it into practice and do it, then that's what happens. And so, but here's the thing that I've been wrestling with is how many of us, and I've done this in my own life, we consult with Jesus, or we use him as our last resort versus our first option. And so we build a house on our own intellect. We build a house on our own securities. We build our house on our own, relationship network that we can build, or whatever. We build. And then out of nowhere, some sort of storm comes. And I think what it reveals is like, man, I really built the house on me or something else other than God. And so then it's like, oh man, there's the cracks right there. And then the other thing too that I was thinking about was, anybody knows this that's done remodeling, house projects, construction, it's just inevitable. It is inevitable that if you build a house on the wrong foundation, the walls are going to crack. And so I've lived in a house. I remember looking up and going, why is that crack coming through the sheetrock like that? And it's starting to split, get wider and wider, just like you see on a windshield, right? And then we go, oh, well, I just need to go up and spackle it and put some fresh paint over it. And then it's like, why does that keep coming back? It has nothing to do with the wall. The foundation is screwed up. And so that's the other side of it, is we go through life trying to just spackle where the foundation's off. And thinking that somehow if I just spackle this, or if I just
put a Band-Aid on
this, then am I really, this is why I think it's a good passage am I really come to grips with the fact is the cracks in my life is a result of the foundation. And I can sit here and put Band-Aids on and try to patch stuff, but I'm not, it's kind of a form of denial, or I'm not really dealing with the root issue. And so it comes back to that, like, where am I putting my faith? Where am I putting my hope? What the practices I'm doing? Because Jesus was very specific there. It's like the things you do. So it's not just an intellectual exercise. It's not like if you just put your faith in me, you're going to have the right foundation. He actually says, you hear my words, but you have to do them. And so there's a way of life that when we live our life in such a way, is like it strengthens the foundation that you're building on.
So for some people, I think it's probably, depending on how you grew up, it's probably very easy, depending on your upbringing, your parents, your financial situation. Some people could say, well, there was easy for them. Their foundation was, they were born on third base. And I don't mean that just financially, but I mean in terms of being given the right teaching. And then I know even some friends now and guys I talk to and guys who listen to this podcast. And I had one say to me, he goes, I love it, but it's not for me. And I said, okay, why? Why do you say that? Well, I don't know all that stuff. And I don't have a life. I didn't grow up in the church. I have no foundation of faith. But the more than I've talked to other guys, I guess my point in this is it doesn't matter. It's not like your foundation has had to start when you were 1 year old and had to have all of these things and all these privileges growing up, because oftentimes you can see a foundation form and get strong in a short amount of time when there is dedication and sacrifice given to the reparation project and the restoration project, as you were talking about with homes a minute ago. I think that in my mind. So do you find that oftentimes, and there's this too, do you find that sometimes when a foundation is recast, sometimes it's stronger than one that maybe was great from the beginning? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It depends on if you're, and everybody runs hot and cold in their lives, and you'll have these seasons of life where you are pouring into it and then comes the drift back. But oftentimes it seems to me, and I've got a couple of friends like this, one in particular who had to go away for a couple of years after doing some missteps. But now, and I had another friend quote this too, who also was in a certain kind of situation. They're liked better, and they're better now had they not had the revelation and the revealing point in their life where they realized their foundation was not strong or was built on sand. But do you find sometimes those people run at a higher pitch and maybe even have a higher dedication than those who had the quote perfect foundation growing up?
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. I like that analogy, being bored on third. That's a great way of saying that. It's so true, because some of us are like, man, I'm starting from the dugout, and man, I'm not even on deck yet. That's how far I got to go to even get to third. And others, you're born with more advantages, more pedigree, more, your home life was more this and that, and you grew up in the faith, and versus someone who's just had the hard knocks of life and have had to just go through things. And I love that, because that's kind of what you see through the whole Bible. I think at the end of the day, the theme of the Bible that's so crazy, every hero that God raised up to use, there was a narrative storyline. Every one of these could be a movie episode somewhere in the cinema, where you see someone that you take, one of my favorite stories, when you look in the Old Testament, is this, David, for instance. And David was a guy that, what I love about David was he started as this shepherd kid, right? His kid was out in the shepherd and, all that kind of stuff. He was kind of despised, looked down on, like, oh, you're the younger guy. But then the Goliath, right? But what's interesting was that David was facing his giant because he faced, when he was a shepherd, the bears came and attacked. It says the lions came and attacked. And he saw God's hand of favor on him in those hard situations. And that fueled his faith to be able to go against a bigger giant. So we talk about like a foundation of faith. It's those who've been tested. those who've been it's been sifted inside of them, that they know that they cannot put their faith in themselves. And I think that some of us, you can grow up in situations where that realization of, I can't put my faith in anything but God because I had no other choice.
Mm-hmm.
And you learn that lesson a lot quicker, whether it's circumstantially or personally. I mean, then you got others that didn't have that, and it takes longer. But when you come to a place of desperation and you're like, man, there's no other place to build my foundation but God. And then I think there's something cool when you talk with people who have gone through something really hard, where they have built their foundation on either their own success, and then that success just comes crumbling down.
Mm-hmm.
And then God takes that person's life through that hardship and says, let's rebuild with me this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel like that house almost is, the best way I can say it is this: imagine taking a house that was built 100 years ago, and it could still be standing today, but imagine that same house that collapses, falls apart, and then it's rebuilt with modern structures and modern technology.
It's a resto mod.
Yeah, exactly.
To put it in car terms.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly what it is. And I love seeing that. In another story is the guy Elijah in the Bible, who everybody knows the classic scene. It's him and thousands of these false prophets. And by the way, Jezebel's the queen, who had a bounty on his head. Talk about fear. Could you imagine being the only person alive that the queen wants to kill and destroy, and empowers the kingdom under her authority to come to your demise? I mean, what if you had to wake up to that every day? And then there's a scene where he just showdown of the gods, and he's like, all right, you false prophets, if your God is true, you call him down and burn the sacrifice. And he's mocking them because it doesn't happen. And he's like, and he prays, and the fire comes down, and he's sort of vindicated that moment. But what people forget was what the process before that. So you look at these highlight moments: David, Goliath, Elijah on Mount Carmel, and like, oh, man of faith. Yeah. But it was the brokenness. Mm-hmm. It was the other times in their life that God had to destroy and dismantle the foundations that were wrong.
Sometimes repeatedly, especially with David.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's one of those, the story of David, and you brought it up. There's lots of obvious, when you're explaining or when you're thinking about the Bible, and some people question it and authenticity, or is it real? Or the story of David is one of those where you go, if you were trying to write a book back then and it was fiction, you wouldn't have had his story go the way it did. No, I mean, that's the crazy part, is hero, villain. I mean,
yeah,
the cracks and the breaks, but the restoration, and even Paul's story is fantastic. And, Paul's wrote most of the New Testament, and he's like my favorite guy because he's so flawed and so bad. And then you talk about his restoration and the rebuilding of his foundation that didn't start when he was young. Right. He wasn't in a situation where he had the education where he could quote verses, and the guys that we all know who do that at times, and nothing against them, but and then you sit there and you go, I can't do that. I don't know that stuff by heart like that. And my foundation probably is nowhere near as strong as theirs. That doesn't mean, and Paul should be your example, it doesn't mean that it can't be rebuilt even better or stronger now.
Totally.
In that saying, it doesn't matter what phase of life that you're in, there's that opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's the stripping away of the wrong foundations. And
yes.
Gideon's another story. Gideon's this known as a coward, really. And God's like, we're going to go and you're the general now. And he's like, what? I mean, this is the last person you would have picked. And then as the story starts, he's got this massive army, and God's like, no, we're going to reduce it down. And by sequence of things, he's left with a couple hundred dudes against all odds. And the whole point of that was to show, in the end, God would win the battle, and that he couldn't take credit for it. But what was happening was God was building a foundation of faith. And this is where I think this is where I'm going to really segue. This is the thing I've been thinking more than anything about. In the Sermon on the Mount, when Jesus says, the wise man who hears my words, puts them into practice, is like a man who builds his house on the right foundation when the storms come. And the man who doesn't is like a fool. And the word there is moron. Mm-hmm. Like Jesus, he pretty much called him as, listen, you can take my advice and leave it. And if you do, let me just tell you, you're going to build a house of cards. It's going to build on sand. It's going to fall apart. And he pretty much said, and if you do that, you're a moron. That's the Greek word for foolish, is you're a moron if you do that. And then at the end of that, you imagine that's like the last of his sermon. That's it. That's all he says. He does this whole sermon, and that's all he says. And he ends. He doesn't end with a prayer. He doesn't end with like
the worship team
come up to the stage and like an altar call, or he doesn't end with any of that. Like that's
Peace
it.
out.
Peace
Encore.
out. He ends with, if you don't listen to what I'm doing, you're a fool. Drops the mic.
See ya.
That's it. And so you're kind of waiting for this. What's the response? And it says this: the crowd was amazed at his words, as one who had an authority unlike anybody else. And I was like, gosh, they were listening going, his words had a weight to it. But the word authority, and this is where I really came down to, is this. That word authority, I would say it this way. The only reason I would build my life on Jesus is because I would say he's the authority of my life. And this is what we tell people. Are you building your house on the words of God? Or are you building your house on the words of, the world's wisdom and things like that? And this is where I think the crux of the whole thing is this. I won't build on anybody's words, their counsel, their advice, their inspiration, unless ultimately I trust them. And I think that's the crux of the whole thing is I'm probably building on the wrong foundation because I have misplaced my trust. I probably put my trust in something else. I put my trust in my bank account, my trust in my doctors. I'm not saying those things are bad. I'm just saying at the end of the day, those things can be flawed. And so I think that our foundations reveal not just where we put our faith, but ultimately where we put our trust. And that's the lesson of the whole Bible. From start to finish, where do you put your trust? The Israelites, that's a classic story of God leading them out of Egypt into the promised land. And the whole journey should have taken just days, ended up being 40 years, and they got lost because they said, we don't trust God. We don't trust God. And he's like, listen, trust me. I'll make this a lot quicker. We'll get to where we need to. And they didn't. And that's why I said earlier that I think that God is not our first option. He's our last resort. So let me exhaust all my other alternatives, meaning let me test where I put my trust. And then if those things don't work out, then, okay, God, you're my last option here. What can you do? And I think we got it backwards.
And it's so much, not to spin off in a whole nother direction, but it reminds me, that is so much of why those who are evildoers in this culture today, the seed they have tried to plant among all others is when they try to remove God from whatever, like they've already done it from schools and everywhere else, they are trying to get you not to trust him.
Yep.
And they even start with younger kids now, and they start to chisel away at the trust in your parents.
Yeah.
And don't tell mom and dad this is going on at school. And then all of a sudden you start to question. Then you expand that out to your heavenly Father, and that starts to build that gross invasion of innocence. Yeah. And then it grows in society. And so when you said that, we can go a whole another 3 hours on that. But it reminds me that is, and that's where and I've even talked to friends who maybe I don't know where they're at in their faith, where they've even used the terms, that's when this is demonic. Yeah. Because that's the enemy's plan all along, is to get you questioning and not trusting your Father.
That's it right there. And that is the end game of all spiritual battle, struggle, warfare, is the one question: can I trust in God? And again, it's hard for us because when we say, "Oh, I trust God," we actually, what we're saying is, "No, I trust in the results of God, and I didn't get the results I wanted." Trusting God means I trust God period.
Yeah.
Regardless of the results I want from God.
Even if.
Because if not, then you're like, no, I don't trust God, because it's contingent on, I trust him only if it works out the way I want to. That's not trust. In some ways
He plays a longer game than we do.
Exactly. And I think the other thing too is there was a time when Jesus was, because again, using that analogy of the foundations, where Jesus said, those who hear my words puts them into practice. I won't practice his words if I don't trust his words. And so then if trust isn't there, practice won't be there. Practice won't be there. The foundation won't be there. It reminded me of another time when Jesus was with the disciples where they left him. It says a great number of them bailed on him.
Yeah, they're like, I don't understand. We're kind of offended.
Yeah, and that's what it says. Like literally, the story goes, Jesus said some words. It says he looks at them and goes, "Why do I offend you?" They didn't like what they were hearing, and it wasn't soothing to their egos, or it didn't And I know the context of it. They didn't like what they heard, and so they just peeled away. They bailed on him, and then Jesus looked at Peter, who stayed, and he said, "What about you, Peter? Are you going to leave too?" And Peter's like, "Where else can I go? You have the words of life." So Peter even understood, I may not always know or get why you say do this or that. But Peter knew, I trust you because your words are life. And I think that's at the end of the day, we put into practice, we obey, we follow, we partner with God and his words and his values, even if they're not popular in culture, even if they're not comforting or comfortable for me to step into. I'm going to do them because I know at the end of the day, it's about laying that right foundation and trusting him that what he's telling us to do is good in the end.
So if storms are revealing, which I know they are, and we kind of started with this, and we're talking about foundations and having a foundation built on rock and not sand, then if you'd have taken me in, and I wasn't a bad guy, but if you'd have taken me in 2014, 2015, how would you have run a litmus test on me to see where my foundation was when outwardly it was right where it should be, and I didn't know any better? So what I'm saying is, and what I said a minute ago, and again, I was a good guy, I just probably had a misplaced identity because of the job I did and because of the moderate part of celebrity of being on TV and being in the Northwest and being known and having meals picked up by restaurant man, all this crap that happens in that world. But it all feeds your identity. So I guess what I would say is, and I even mentioned, when I was going along, I think back, it was pretty easy, man. Everything came pretty, and I worked hard, don't get me wrong, but things came pretty easy. And there were very few speed bumps, or there weren't very many problems. And then it only came after a storm had revealed, yeesh, not sure the identity and not sure the foundation is exactly as it should be. And again, I'm not trying to beat myself up. There wasn't any huge, massive moment. But when you're striving, as we all should be, to be the best we can be, and ideally having the kind of foundation that can weather anything, man, how do you take somebody then? And if there's, I know guys and things are just, and people look at them and go, man, everything they're doing just comes up roses. They got the Midas touch right now. They're just rolling and things are happening. Business is popping and this and that. And the kid made the all-star team. All this stuff's going on for them. How do you then possibly, and you as a pastor especially, how do you give perspective or even lend perspective to somebody that is in that position to almost do a little bit of a check of the oil to see what's going on? You know what I mean? And how do you motivate somebody to even take stock and go, okay, I need to remind myself and I need to test myself and I need to kind of, and there are some people who have tremendous success and have that balance and always are reminded of the perspective necessary to maintain that balance. But I guess and I'm not suggesting you're going to have, and I just dropped that on you, but I do ask you for those things at times because I do have guys in my life who I'd like to say, just make sure a storm shelter is there just in case something happens, or if there is a storm, and it's not always like you like to think there's going to have to be one, but if there is one, how are you built for that? How is your, how's your raincoat? How's your, cause you're going to have those moments, but the challenge is always, how do you prepare somebody or get them to realize it prior to their storm, or does it just take a storm?
I know. Well, that's a good question. Like, do you only know after the storm comes, right?
Right.
So then you're like, oh, that's the only time.
How does the revealing come on the forecast?
Exactly.
Or at least the thought that may be.
Absolutely. Because I think it's like, I love how you said that is because what also came to my mind too is like on a dashboard on a car is you're driving and the oil light
warning lights.
Yeah, and those are good. Like they're meant to tell us, like, hey,
better
we're
pull
avoiding
over,
it.
check some things out.
Yeah, check this out, because if you do, this can prevent and avoid a major catastrophe, and you're broken down on the side of the road. And same thing, like if you have a house, you're building on the right foundation. Is there a way of testing that it's on the right foundation before an ultimate test?
Preventative maintenance.
Yeah. And the only thing I could say is that I think that ultimately, to answer that question, ultimately there is no way until it has been tested. And that doesn't mean that the test has to be a hurricane. That doesn't mean that has to be the test of that. But I think that every day we face micro tests.
Yeah.
And those micro tests, if we're not careful, we can kind of dismiss them. But I think those micro tests reveal a lot inside of us. And like just like an example, if, I get into something with my wife and all of a sudden I feel this like, ego comes out of me or an insecurity of something or whatever it is. It doesn't mean that it has to erupt into a divorce. Like I don't have to wait till there to go, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So I think there's these little things, these little micro tests, I would call them micro shakings and micro storms, that kind of give us, and thank God for that, because it's almost a gracious thing that we have these little micro storms to just kind of go, how was your reaction there? How was your response?
Little stress test,
and go like, how was that? Because if we're paying attention, just like the warning lights on a dashboard, I can ignore those all I want. And then the car engine seizes up, I take it and they're like, you didn't have the oil change forever. Did you not see the yeah? And you're like, oh no. So I think that actually the secret to avoiding even the big crashes is those micro check-in moments with God along the way. And again, Jesus said, he said, if you hear my words and put them into practice. So like a clear test is, am I putting into practice?
Yeah.
Like
that's
a really practical way of going, am I putting into practice? So here's an example. What did Jesus say? He said, if you hear my words. What words are you talking about? He's referring to the whole Sermon on the Mount. Okay, so what did he talk about in the Sermon on the Mount? He said, forgive your enemy. There's a micro storm right there. So am I holding any bitterness in my heart right now? Is there any unforgiveness I have towards, it doesn't have to be your enemy, to my kids, to my friend, my roommate, brother, sister, whatever. If I'm holding on to that doesn't mean the whole, house is crumbling. It's an indicator of, I'm not practicing his words of forgiveness. Therefore, I'm not building on the right foundation. So it's a discipline.
So it's a discipline and a way of life.
Exactly.
Without, and here's the other thing, especially for somebody like me, because hearing this and walking this through, even now, saying it out loud, the danger is for somebody who's built like me and probably has an overabundance of self-awareness. How do you do all this without becoming a worrywart?
I know.
Because then it's like, and that's why a lot of people just live in denial. You don't want to have any self-awareness because it's easier to not look under the hood because you're scared of what you're going to find.
Yep.
And if you think your foundation might be screwed up and built on mud or sand, you're like, I don't want to know that because that's uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
And so then it's just going to cause me stress because then I'm going to start worrying about worst case scenario things and how am I, and I've done that. I mean, I'm somebody who eyes wander to the ends of the earth. What is the proverb?
Yeah.
And a discerning man keeps wisdom in view. My eyes are all over the horizon, and it's not in a good way. So that's the first challenge that I thought personally as you were talking was, how do you then take that stock and do those stress tests without turning into an absolute stress case?
That's good. That's so true. Well, and I think we can, what happens too is we can get obsessed with those things and fearful and anxious of what's next. And
and maybe that's not foundational stuff. So I'll go back to that.
Yeah. I like the idea what you just said though, is I think some of it's those disciplines, and that's it's a good word and a bad word that I hear other people use and reference, because I hear people say it and I'm like, yes, we got to have the right disciplines in life. If you see that discipline is about having priorities that you live out. If you see discipline as this burden of religion that he's putting on you to be perfect, then that comes with its own crushing, and wallowing in, man, today I suck. I missed it today. I didn't do this today. Now you're just like constantly in shame and feeling all the, negative things about how we are. But I think it's like when I look at each day has a test. And like I said here, there's micro tests every single day. And I like to be able to go take an inventory of myself, like you said, be self-aware enough, but we need a lot of grace on that. We need a lot of grace on it. Here's what I mean by that. Okay, let's get real practical. So if we're talking about forgiveness, okay, just sit here at the end of today. Was there anybody I'm holding resentment towards today? Okay, that's a micro test to check my heart and go, man, I'm holding this against so-and-so. All right. And that doesn't mean you call them in that moment and blabber all over the phone and say, it's more about a heart change and a heart check and go, gosh, I am holding that. And that's why Jesus said, pray for your enemies. Because it was more about, had to do with changing our heart. So in that moment, I'm like, okay, God, I'm going to redirect that negative emotion of resentment and turn it into praying for that person. And as I do that, my heart begins to change. It doesn't mean that I'm dismissing maybe what they did. That's not forgiveness. Forgiveness is not dismissing. It's not being a doormat or any of those things. It's just it's a heart issue. And so then what happens is I can go, okay, my heart's in a good place today with that specific thing. If it's not, and I let that linger day after day after day after day, knowing what I should do, but I don't, then that's when I know I'm building on the wrong foundation. But you have to give yourself
sounds like
grace.
A pile of shame to me.
Exactly. It's exactly
which causes stress.
Yeah. And God is so good. He's like, yeah, mercies are new every morning for a reason. He doesn't say mercies are new every month or every year. He says they're new every morning. So guess what? Tomorrow I get up again and it's a new day and I get to say, okay, God, I hope today that I pass the tests. I hope today I put into practice your words. I hope today I listen and obey. And then this is what I do every morning. This is my prayer every morning, every stinking morning. And I wish I could tell you I spend hours, I go find a cave with candles hours. Like a monk. And like, I don't do that. I literally sometimes just honestly, it's like, oh my gosh, I got a meeting in 30 minutes I got to get to. And that prayer, I pray every day. And sometimes it's a 5-minute prayer. Sometimes it's way longer. And like, honestly, just a classical example. Today I got up and I told you I had to go to run the DMV.
That's always a great time.
And so I got up and I'm like, I'm getting to the DMV and I'm sitting there and I did this prayer while I'm at the DMV. So again, it doesn't have to be this like sacred, romantic experience somewhere. It's just a heart change. And I literally sitting there like, God, if there's anything in my heart, anything in the way I'm living my life that's out of alignment with your words, would you just show that to me? And he's so good. He doesn't do it out of shame. That's how you know it's not from him. He's like, it's a course correction. And he just says, yeah, hey, I want you to forgive this person. Or, hey, I want you to be more patient with this person. Or,
and you'll feel that.
And you will. And that's what I'm saying. Like, it's that daily check-in. And then I say, and this is as important, I ask God an invitation. And I say, Lord, help me though, do that. Lord, help me do that through your power, through your spirit, because I can't put into practice in my own ability. I won't have enough forgiveness. I won't have enough patience. I won't have enough love. That's why the Bible calls those the fruit of the Spirit, because I need His Spirit, His power working through me to put those things into practice. So it's a dependence on Him, not just an awareness of myself.
You kind of read my mind on that when I was kind of thinking about, I mentioned a minute ago, preventative maintenance. And I think for me, and I've gotten in the habit of doing this with a friend, is we just have a online daily devotional, and it gets a reminder on my phone. And 98% of the time I do it first thing when I wake up. And like your prayer, and I know others who, when they get out of bed, that's the time they do this. It seems like that is the time where you pop the hood, and it only takes 10 minutes, sometimes 15, do a reading, then the scripture that follows it, and then we comment back and forth about what it meant. And then during the day, he'll chime in, I'll chime in, and it continues on like a little mini message board, and it's daily. And then it goes away, and you move on to the next. And sometimes they're 20-day devotionals, sometimes they're 5 or 6. And I get them through the YouVersion. They're easy. Anybody can get them. But to me, that's something I never had done before until the last few years. But in terms of the maintenance required on your foundation, that's that discipline we talked about, where there are practical, easy, short things that are not time-consuming, don't cost you any money, that you can do on a daily basis to prepare that foundation should a storm come.
Yep.
And it seems like, and that's just one idea, and your prayer was another, exactly the same thing. And I've heard others talk about, sometimes they have the same exact prayer every day when they get up. Because I know, ideally, you look at a retired couple or something, you can go and have your quiet time and sit down and have coffee and then go through and start a book. And a lot of people are, but the time you get up, it's a horse race. The kid's out the door and bum, 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 bum. And I understand that sounds to some unrealistic, that you would have the time to take the discipline to sit down and do that. But I'm telling you, it does not take very long. And I'm not saying I'm there, but I'm saying that's a daily oil check first thing in the morning. And I got to do it. And if I don't do it, it's bothering me all day that I haven't done it yet. Yeah. And there's some days I don't feel like doing it, honestly. And it gets to be like 8 or 9, and I'm like, I'd rather sit here and watch TikTok videos of hunting and cats and all this stuff. But then I have to stop and go, nope, this is where I have to go. And I don't know what the result will be. I don't know that what will be revealed in the next storm, but I got to think that's going to help. And if it's going to help, and some of the storms I've been through, they sucked, just like they do for everybody. So why would you not take that time to make sure you are outfitted and that your foundation and whatever your life is about is built for whatever you can control. And I mean, a lot of things you can't control, but whatever you can control is about that foundation, so that it's in the best shape possible should something bad happen.
Yep, exactly.
Or not bad happen, or a challenge come, put it that way.
Totally. And I think it's also the realization we don't have to live in fear of the storm. Because I know I can do that. I can say,
I do.
My whole focus is on the storm and being prepared for the storm. Oh. And this is probably a segue in a whole nother podcast.
No. You're hitting exactly right, because I'm somebody who obsesses on worst case scenario, because it's happened to me a lot in the last few years, and it's stupid. And I realize that, admit it, but yes, keep going.
Well, and this is where I'll end on this, because this really gives me, I love, and I understand the verse is in the context of this. So, but the verse that I love hearing is, He is faithful when we are not. And I know the context of that. It's not just a blank check to do whatever we want, and then, God's got to come and be faithful and make up for. I understand consequences. I get that. But what I love about it is that at the end of the day, it's not about me mitigating storms, because then I'm just obsessed with storms, and I'm obsessed with the fear of what's going to happen. It's me just focused on His nature and His goodness. And I know that He's good, and I know that's that trust piece that we were talking about before, is that if I trust that He's good and I obsess more on His goodness and faithfulness, I don't obsess on the storms, then actually the irony of it is that when the storms come, I'm more prepared. So every day, and this is what I would tell you as a real practical thing, start a journal. I know those dudes don't do it. I started one, and I stop them, and I start them and I stop them. But I tried there for a while, and it was really good. Every day, just write 1 or 2, 3 ways you saw God's faithfulness. Go to bed, even if you don't journal, just maybe go to bed every night, and the last things you say before you go to bed, God, thank you for this, this, and this.
Yep.
Because you end the day, God, you were faithful. What ends up happening is your mind switches from being obsessed with storms, and you begin to be more obsessed with his faithfulness. And at the end of the day, that's going to lay the right foundation. And actually, it's an antidote to worry and fear and anxiety.
That's awesome. Well, we try to keep these 35, 40 minutes. We're a little longer on this one, but I don't care. It's fine. I want to make it like, sometimes people say they listen in the car, and I don't mind if it lingers into a couple of drives, but we always do appreciate you spending time with us. As I mentioned earlier, you can hear Mike's sermons on gracechapelonline.org, and there's a great one on this that was a couple weeks ago. So if you want more on this, or maybe hear it in more of a sermon format, which has a lot of scripture that goes with it, I invite you to check that out. Also, we are on Spotify and iTunes, and on the Vertical Pursuit app. So if you don't have the Vertical Pursuit app, go get that just from the App Store, and it has some great readings in it. It has a book that Mike and others wrote, which kind of give you more on discipleship, and we're going to get to that too in another episode coming up, because I want you to talk about that, because that's extremely vital right now, and that helps your foundation too. But all of that is part of Vertical Pursuit, and we appreciate you being a part of it, and we will see you next time.
We invite you to subscribe to our podcast, comment, or message us, and check out our website at verticalpursuit.org. Download the VP app and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.